Hello everyone, welcome to the Photopocene podcast with me, Josie Purcell. I love having the opportunity to speak with photo artists worldwide about eco-conscious photography and how the environment relates to their work. This time I'm joined by Susa Solero from Germany. We take a look at her work that highlights waste and littering, how it's good to not be pigeonholed to just one style, her work taken while on train rides, and her love for minimalism and abstract form. But there's so much more too, so keep listening to find out more from Susa. Well, I'm very excited this time on the Photopocene podcast to be joined by a photographer who is based in Germany, and she is Susa Solero. So welcome, Susa. I'm really glad you're here.
Well, thank you, Josie, for having me.
No, absolutely my pleasure. I'm really looking forward to our chat as well. I'm really sort of interested in sort of what's motivating you to take photographs, and particularly your photographs that you've been doing recently, which in English is, I think, called the garbage dump, but in German, and I'm so sorry, Susa, I'm going to say this so badly, Mülldeponie.
Mülldeponie.
So I'm so sorry for doing a disservice to your language, but
No
it's that's one of the projects that we'll talk about in a little bit. But yeah, where actually are you in Germany? Where are you based?
It's close to Frankfurt. It's about 50 kilometers northeast from Frankfurt.
Okay. I do need to visit. When I talk to people on the podcast, I love learning where everyone is from, and yeah, one day hopefully I will get to visit.
Sounds good to me.
So just sort of your journey then to photography. From my understanding, you actually earlier in your sort of career, you actually focused on sports, and that's what you did. So and photography is something that you actually came back to, I guess, a bit later in life. So what is your journey into photography then? How did you pick up a camera?
Well, when I was a child, I just had a real simple camera to take pictures when I went on vacation with my parents and stuff. And later on, when I got older, the same thing. So I was not very much into photography. I always was in art when I was a child, when I was in school. I had advanced art class in school when I finished my gymnasium. But then sports came into my life, and everything that had to do with art kind of, fell back somewhere. And then I think it was 2015 when I got my first smartphone.
Yeah.
Yes, and that was the moment actually when I started taking pictures. And this is what I mainly do still up to date. I mean, I have a pretty good camera, a Nikon, and I got a Sony for Christmas last year for my boyfriend. But still, most of my pictures I take with my smartphone.
Absolutely. I think certainly in the they're just wonderful cameras on smartphones
Yeah.
now. And I think there's the saying, if people say, oh, what's your favorite camera, and it's almost well, it's the one that's in my pocket, or it's the one that yeah. So mobile phones, smartphones really have opened up, I think, a new world of photography as well. And I'm really fascinated. I love using my own smartphone to create work, so really intrigued about that. And again, I think rather than you having a sort of specific genre or topic that you like to photograph, you're quite inspired by something that might catch your eye, or
Yeah.
is that sort of the thing that inspires you then, sort of in
Yeah.
the moment?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, there's definitely nature that is a big inspiration for me, but otherwise, I would say anything that strikes me, wherever I am in a city or in the forest or at somebody's home or whatever, there's something that kind of, tickles my eye, gets my attention, and then I take a picture of, and I never know what it will be.
Yes. Yeah, that must be quite exciting then.
Yeah, yeah, most of the time, because I never know what's gonna come out of it.
Do you find yourself when you're working with your smartphone, do you prefer to do what people might call straight photography, or do you like to play with apps and editing, post-production?
Rather the last one. I'm not documentary
Mm,
photographer at all. I haven't found what you call it in English, a way to it yet,
yeah,
So I love editing, and I do all my editing on the phone directly, just with the pre-installed app
brilliant.
by the it's a Samsung, so by them. And and then there's another app. It's called Snapseed.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So those two I actually use, and that's about it.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. I'm also a fan of Snapseed. I think it's a really useful app for photographers to use. Yeah, really creative and sort of adds that little extra elements
Yeah.
that you might sometimes want to use. So with your work then, and I will come back to the garbage dump that I mentioned earlier, because there's some really lovely photographs that you've taken I'd like to have a chat about. But I've also noticed on your website that you mentioned that you're really quite obsessed by, well, two other things, which is train rides and also minimalism or abstract art. So what's the train ride one all about then?
Well, I'm not really sure what the point is. I just love the situation sitting in a moving, if it's a car or a train or whatever. I mean, when I drive myself, of course, I cannot do that. But when
Yeah,
I ride with somebody or I'm in a train or in a bus or so, and taking a picture then, and just, I mean, I'm not, there's no influence from my side on it. I just have to, look through the camera and try to get a good picture, in a sense of that it's not all blurry, but sometimes even if it gets blurry, it's interesting. So it has to
yeah,
do with this mixture of motion and stillness, I think. And somehow a lot of good things came out of it. I mean, I went to Australia 2017 and had a 4 hours train ride, and it was kind of, not a fast train, so
mhm,
I had a lot of time looking out of the window and took a lot of pictures, and very interesting mixture of stillness and moving parts came out of that. So, and I don't really know what's happening because I'm not a photographer at all. I'm not a professional, or don't know what on a technical side is happening. It's just intuition. So
yes. No, I think that's a really great way to work. What sort of moves you to take a photograph and what you see. And then when you share it with others, they might see something different or new in
yeah,
that work. So it's really quite exciting as well. And yeah, people can sometimes get a little bit maybe weighed down in the technical side of things. So it's sometimes I think a refreshing way to work and almost to let yourself go with the moment.
yeah, exactly. I think that's what I mostly do.
I like that. A more stressless life in a way, maybe.
Yes, I think so too. Yeah, yeah, and much more. And I am. I just watched a documentary yesterday about the Biennale in 2016 in Sao Paulo, Brazil,
Mhm.
and they said that the topic was the unexpected, the things you don't know yet what's going to happen. And I thought, well, this is exactly what I like about my work in photography, that I never know what's going to come out of it. And, you know,
That's brilliant. And I think you've described yourself as the fictional character. I'm not sure everyone will know the name, but hopefully many will. Is Pippi Longstocking?
yeah, yes, exactly.
So you like to create your own worlds, and I think you've used another word, and I'm so sorry to everyone who speaks German, lives in Germany. Gestalten.
Gestalten, yeah.
Hey.
This, well, it's a kind of designing, but there's a slight difference in the German meaning of gestalten, because there's creating in it, there is designing in it. Yeah, so it's how say that, a bigger word, or a word for a lot more than just designing.
Yes, yeah. And I suppose that almost in a way then encompasses that your other obsession is this interest in minimalism and
Yeah.
abstract. So when you, with your work and with your photography, some of the images I've seen, definitely you can see that. Is that something that you're very keen to do in all your photographs, is to try and create some sort of abstract, or is that just one of those elements of what you're doing?
I would say it's rather one of those elements, because I don't think every photo or every image is
Mm,
how to say that, fits in that. You know, you cannot use
yes,
every picture to and make an abstract thing out of it. So again, here I go with intuition. A lot of time, like for example, there's I love water, and taking pictures of water, if it's a puddle or if it's the ocean or whatever. And I have a couple pictures of puddles, um, which then I edited into an abstract. So,
yeah,
and this is a raw image that really works in that way, you know. But others, like if you take a picture of a landscape that is very complex, it gets hard to make an abstract out of it, and it
yeah.
might be overdosed, you know.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I know what you mean. I mean, some of the photographs that I'm looking at on your website that you have under your sort of minimalism heading, and the abstract sort of element to them are very, very striking. And I think also um, you've got images that you've taken, I'm presuming, from when you've been on the trains, which are sort of the more landscape shots, which have that almost, they have a real painterly quality to
Yeah.
them. So yeah, it's really lovely to sort of see the contrast in what you're creating. You're not putting yourself in one box or another, which is
Yeah, which sometimes seems to be a problem. I mean, I'm attending, is the word, attending in contests. I mean,
yes,
sending, yeah. So that's what I do quite a lot, and a lot of times I get the feeling that they prefer that an artist is kind of focused on a certain topic. You know, that it's
yes,
not like he's interested in that and that and that and that, but rather do, like for example, only landscapes or only minimalism and so on. And
yes. I can definitely see and understand that. Yes, I do think sometimes perhaps people overall have a tendency to sort of want to put people in a compartment.
yeah,
It's along the lines of when maybe someone asks, so what do you do for work? And if you do more than one job, they may not. I'm like, oh, okay.
exactly. That's what I experienced too. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, and I will, just going back to your trains, I have to say I have a shared passion for trains. I actually many years ago went interrailing around Europe, and it was a fantastic experience.
But it slows you down. I mean, if I went from Frankfurt to Vienna into 2018, and it took about 6 hours to get there.
Mm.
But as just, it's such a lovely time to sit. You can watch, you can get up and walk around, and there's no rush in it. And this is what I really like about train rides. And of course, then you can take a lot of pictures all the time.
Yes, yeah. When you're actually on the train taking photographs, do you ever get other passengers wanting to know what you're doing, or are you sort of, is it very much your own world while you're there?
Well, I think most of the time they don't say anything, but
Yeah.
sometimes they say, so what are you taking pictures of? Because the
Yeah.
train is moving. Um, and then I show them and they say, oh, that's so interesting, because they never thought about taking a picture during a train ride while it's moving, of course.
Yeah. Yeah.
But most of the time I'm just for myself and they,
Um, we've mentioned it, or I've mentioned it a couple of times now. You've sent me some information about a project that I think you've been working on for about 4 years now. Do tell me if that's wrong. And that's the one that translates as, I believe, the garbage dump.
yeah.
And that's really sort of been inspired, I think, from when you used to take walks in the woods when you were a child. Um, what can you tell me about the inspiration for actually taking these photographs of, I guess, discarded litter,
What do you mean discarded letter?
uh, thrown away rubbish,
Oh, okay, yeah.
garbage?
Well, it kind of came out of being annoyed. Like I said, I mean, I went to, I used to go into nature when I was a child because my brothers would take me with them. They're much older than me. And we always had dogs in the family, so we went for long walks and stuff. And I remember, well, first of all, I remember that my parents and everybody who was an adult at that time would tell kids not to throw their stuff on the ground on the street or in the forest or wherever. So it was normal for me to take it home or to pick it up and put it in a bin or something.
Mm,
Um, and I think, and I had two dogs, like I said before, and went for long walks with them. And I think I could kind of observe or watch over the years that it got worse again. So people
mm,
keep throwing stuff out of their car window, whatever, more and more. And I don't know. I cannot remember the day when this happened the first time, but I know I was for a walk and then I just got so annoyed about that. And I thought, okay, I have to take a picture of that. But then I thought, yeah, well, I don't want to take a documentary picture of it because I'm not interested in that.
yeah.
And I, well, like I did or I do with every photo, I edited it. And then I realized when I put it at that time, I just put the pictures on Instagram and sometimes on Facebook, and people reacted to that. And they
Mm,
said, "Oh, this looks interesting," or "This looks nice," and "This is beautiful." So I started, just taking a picture of anything that I found in the forest. And I mean, you find a whole lot. I found an umbrella, and you find the bottles, and I mean, so I mean, this is really ridiculous sometimes what you can find in the
mm.
forest. So
And yeah, it's such a shame, isn't it, to think
yeah,
that someone has just thrown it away with no thought about what will happen. Uh,
yeah,
where that little one might end up, if it could enter the rivers, if wildlife could be um, maimed by the litter, or people who are visiting or in those outdoor spaces. Now, with a lot of the images for this project, they you have very vivid colours. Is
yeah.
that Yeah? Is that something that you've sort of developed over time, or have you done that almost from the get-go? This sort of very contrasty some of them are very bright, and but sort of almost, how can I say this, almost some of them have almost a filmic feel about them. They could be a still from a film.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, I know I do that, and I did that from the beginning. I have, obviously, I have a strong um, interest in contrasts. I like strong colors, um, strong shapes, and everything.
Mm.
And somebody, I think it was on Instagram, said, "Oh, so you prefer a contrast?" And then that's obviously what it is, you know. But I could not tell you why it is that way. I just always go back to that. Sometimes I try to use more pastel. Is that a word?
uh,
Pastel colors.
and
So
some more, sorry.
more pastel colors,
Oh
like that.
yeah, pastel.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
pastel. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So this time is my pronunciation bad.
Oh, no, no, no. It's so much better than my non-existent German, so please don't apologize.
Yeah, so I tried a couple times to edit the pictures more in that tones, but yeah, sometimes it works, but mostly I come back to a strong contrast and
Mm.
strong colors. So, but don't ask me why it is like that. I have no clue.
Yeah, you can see that you're very much drawn to it, and it does work. There's some really powerful images there. There's one that I personally really quite well. There's two that I've been looking at that I really do like, and there's one which perhaps isn't in the forest. I'm not sure, but it's got very red bristles. An old brush, it looks like, has been thrown away.
Okay, is it a red brush? And
Yes.
yes, this I took on the street here in the village I live in, and it was just a red brush lying on the street and on the sidewalk.
Mm.
So yeah.
I really like that one, and the other one I'm quite drawn to is the one where you have well, I mean there are a few, but the one with the thrown away doll, who's
Oh yes, yes. I remember that one. I was in the car driving to the next little town here to go get some groceries, and I saw this doll lying on the street. And I thought, oh my gosh, I have to take a picture, and almost, stopped immediately and tried to find a place where I could leave the car and
yeah.
ran over the street and sat down and took the picture. And the people who drove by, like, oh my God, what's she doing? So
Well, it
yeah,
definitely it definitely works, and I imagine it, like you say, when people look at it, they will comment, or it will have some sort of reaction. Do you find, how are you mainly sharing your work then? Is it on your website and your social media? Is that,
yes,
or
mainly, yeah, mainly. I mean, I started on Instagram and then of course Facebook, and I put up my website and everything. And somebody said last year, because I make calendars every year with mostly landscape stuff and stuff that works for people. But somebody said, well, you should make a calendar with the garbage stuff.
yeah.
Um, yeah, and I think I will do that for next year. Um, yeah, but so that's where I mainly share the stuff. And not everybody likes garbage as a motive, so
But it would always work as a really good reminder to everyone every time they turn over the calendar, even if they towards the end of the month had started to forget about it. It would
yeah.
certainly, yeah, keep it in the forefront, I think, of people's minds about sort of looking after the environment, and sort of being mindful of what they're throwing away. So yeah, I think it'd be a really interesting calendar to do, and yeah, I hope you do. I do hope you go on and do that. And now we've had a little sort of couple of comments about language. My not able to speak another language, and you're able to speak English and German. I don't know if you can speak any others, um, but language, I think, is quite important to you as well. So how do you sort of make language work through your visual art?
Well, you're right. Language is very important to me. And for one thing, I give the pictures a title because it's easier for me to remember them. And I can say, okay, that is then that picture, and I immediately have a picture in my mind
Yeah.
what it is. Um, but concerning finding a title for a picture, it's I sit there and look at it and I think, so what comes up to my mind? Like, for example, I have one photo, I think I sent it to you too, where it's black and white, and a big balloon is on the street, and I took the picture so it kind of fills out the whole street, and it's called Verstopfung, which is constipation in English. And so I don't know. It just came up to my mind. I thought, oh, this is a title that fits the whole thing. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, okay. So I put the title to the picture. So
Yeah, so you're using sort of language that sort of, I guess, is maybe coming up with a title for a photograph in one way. Perhaps it's almost the same as choosing a name for a baby. It's just,
well, but the thing is, with a baby, you already know what it you know what it looks like when it comes out. But I
that's
think
true.
it's hard to imagine what it looks like later on when it's an adult. So.
Yeah. Ah, fantastic. Well, I do like, because you do actually with your titles as well. You can use I think you sort of you can either choose something serious or you can choose something with humor.
Yeah.
Um, what do you find tends to work when people are looking at the images then? Is there, have you noticed, are people drawn to work where you give unusual or funny titles, or are they drawn, or is there just no noticeable difference?
No, there's a big difference. I mean, just a guy today, because I had this picture for Stockholm constipation. I had that in a contest, and it was in the, what do you call it in English? No, it's not beneath. It's in the winners. Oh gosh, what's the word for that? In the selection. So, oh my God. So they had three winners, and I'm one of them with his photo. And
Oh, fantastic.
yeah, and I posted it in Facebook, and a friend of mine wrote, "Well, if I have constipation, I don't get a prize for that." So yeah, so mostly they rely to the funny stuff, but what they say often is that they can rely to the titles, and I'm not very much into finding a title that it has nothing to do with the picture, or people
Mm,
cannot even imagine what I mean. I mean, sometimes it happens, but very seldom. Most of the time, they immediately can find a connection, between
yes.
the photo and the title. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's important somehow because, um, I mean, we are so much focused on language, and
Mm,
our whole interaction is uh, depending on language. So I think it's
mm,
important to find a good title for a picture so you remember better. I mean, I do, I remember
yeah.
my pictures better, so I can imagine that somebody else looking at it is the same thing. And often they come and they start thinking about it because of the title. They look at the picture. I have one, for example, that's also a balloon. It's a yellow balloon, but when it's all flat, there's no air in it, and
Yes.
it's lying in the sidewalk in the water. It had rained before. It was all wet and everything. It looks a little bit sad, and I
Yeah.
called it "Death of a Rubber Duck."
Yes.
So, so
Yeah.
they look at it and think like, "Death of a rubber duck? Oh yeah, yellow." And they remember what rubber ducks look like. So
Yeah, yeah, I know. I really love that photo, and yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can. Yeah, it does look like very forlorn and a very deflated rubber duck.
yes, That's the word for it. Thank you.
So with your sort of thinking about the work, the images that you take that relate to nature, I think you also sort of create work that sort of flowers and animals, and obviously the landscape images as well that you've taken photographs of. But with the garbage one, that's sort of the one that I guess is sort of saying the most about an impact on the environment, and the fact that when you're dropping litter, I mean, other than the fact it's not very nice, it can have a other negative impacts on the environment. What do you actually feel your photography can do to raise the profile of an environmental issue such as littering and dropping garbage on the floor?
Well, I guess if I was like, for example, one of the Kardashians, it probably would have a big impact because they're known, you know, and if somebody who is really well known, it's much easier to have an impact in a certain way. I mean, who knows me, you know what I mean? So it's probably hard to have an impact just with this little project. But on the other side, I realize that many times when people look at my photos and you know realize that it's garbage, they come up and say, "Oh, yeah, you're right. I mean, people throw stuff in nature and everywhere, and it's getting worse, and we really should do something about it." Or some of them do something. You know, they like collecting garbage is going for running. I mean, jogging and everything, and then collecting the litter is a new, it's not modern, but it's in, you know.
Yes.
So um so there's people who do something about it and they say, oh yeah, I collect litter when I go outside and bring it back home and throw it away. And others come up and say, yeah, I realized it's getting worse and everything, but I'm not sure if they really get active, but maybe they just get aware of it. So
Yeah.
you never know what comes out in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. I think even if it doesn't have an instant action, if it plants a seed,
Exactly.
yeah, and people start to think about their own actions a little bit more, or if it inspires them to you know go out and do a local litter pick, then all good. What I know that you've actually, with some of your work, you just mentioned then that your image as your constipation image is has been chosen and
Mm-hmm.
selected, and as what else, what other work have you got? Because I think you've got some work, do please correct me if I'm wrong, you've got work that's going to be on show in Canada, Athens, gosh, quite a few places. So yeah, where are you showing your work? What shows have you been selected for?
Well, there were some, like I said before, in Athens, I had a couple, but they're not all from this project. I mean, from the Mülldeponie. They're from, you know, all kind of photos. The one with the red brush was in one contest once and was selected and was shown there. But then also in London, in Rome lately. And right now I have a exhibition here close by in a little town called Büdingen. Um, that was the topic was estate, so summer.
Yeah,
But we were not. I mean, it wasn't. The point was not that we had to find pictures that fit the topic. But I thought, well, if it's the topic, I tried to find some pictures that you know somehow fit in that.
yeah,
And that's what I did. And it started on the 3rd of July and goes till the 10th of October.
fantastic.
Yeah, it's the first one in Germany, actually. It's really funny because the first one I had was in Hillsburg, California, where one of my brothers lives. and he has a leather store. And when I came over, I think it was in 2018, I asked him, could we do a little exhibition at your store? And he said, oh yeah, we can do that. I help
Oh,
you.
fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because I started there. I had a couple of exhibitions in California, and then everywhere in the world, uh, in
Yeah.
Europe, not in the world, but in Europe, and so yeah.
Yeah, and there's some on your website that you've shared, and I know that you've had some work in Blank Wall Gallery, and I'm looking at one of them now, which is called Always Gone, and it is making me laugh a little bit because it almost it almost looks like it's the end of the loo roll it's a great image. It really is. It's just shades of white, different, and yeah, so I really, going back to what you were saying about sort of um the link between the image and the title, it doesn't have to be really specific, but it definitely does add that an added element to it, I think. So yeah, that's a really great photograph there. You've got other sort of images as well, I think, that you've done, some of the work in Athens, that was selected for the black and white contest.
Hmm.
Um, and those are really striking. You've got sort of three images there, um, which is sort of an old car and a mountain top,
Hmm.
and then it looks like to me a tree in front of a very large building, but the building might have scaffolding. I'm not sure if that's just my eyesight, but yeah, that's a sort of a different thing, because most of your images have that strong color, but you've gone black and white there. Is black and white something you're drawn to, or you actually like working in?
Yeah, very much. But I just think that not everything works in black and white.
Yeah.
Sometimes, like the one with the car, with this old car, I took the same picture in colors and then,
Mm.
changed it to black and white. And I really like it in color too, but it has a totally different atmosphere in black and white. It looks more like those movies from the 40s.
Yes.
And yeah, so sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But as I said before, I never know if it works or not. I try, and then sometimes I give up because I think, okay, this doesn't work at
Yeah.
all. And it, with the with the mountain top in the middle, I also have it in color, so
Mm.
both work. And the one on the right with the tree in front of the building, that one I think only works in black and white. So I
Yeah.
like editing the pictures into black and white, but like I said before, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and I never know why it works sometimes and why not. So
Yeah. No, definitely. Sometimes I think sort of almost stripping away the color can bring out a completely a different sense in the image, a
yeah,
different sort of feeling within the image. And um definitely with the one that you've spoken about with the car in, you certainly get, I was sort of thinking 40s 50s America almost.
yeah.
Yeah, it has that sort of uh, feel to it for me. um so if people want to see your work then, Susa, where can they find you? Obviously your website, your social media. What are the links for them to find you and have a look at your work?
Well, right now I'm working on my shop that will be Susa's side for shop, but I will put that. I mean, right now I have this button on my side, on my website, my normal website. When you click on it, you will get to my shop. Um, but otherwise, of course, this website you were talking about, the susasolero.com, and then of course Facebook is the same Susa's site. So
Okay.
SUSA apostrophe, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. S and then site. And Instagram is the same name. So, and otherwise, right now, come to Büdingen to my exhibition.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. That would be fantastic. Well, I will make sure, Susa, that all of your links for people are part of the podcast. So hopefully people listening in will head over and have a look at your work. I just want to say that I've had a really lovely chat with you, learning about what you're doing and sort of what inspires you, and really lovely to sort of hear, you know, that you're creating images as well using your smartphone. Really pleased to chat to you and learn a little bit more about that.
Thank you very much. The pleasure is on my side.
Thank you, Susa. It's been good to chat.
Thank you, Josie. Yeah, it was a pleasure.
What a really lovely chat with Susa. She has a wonderful eye for an image, and I hope you do head on over to her website and social media channels to take a look. You can find her at susasolero.com, at Susa's site on Instagram and on Facebook. I will put those details in the text of the podcast too. And don't forget, if you'd like to get in touch and talk about your photography and how it relates to environmental matters or how you work in an eco-conscious way, please do. You can find me via josiepurcellphotography.com. See you next time. Yay! Hello everybody, thank you so much for joining me, your host on the Photopocene podcast, Josie Purcell. I'm really glad you're here and listening in again. This time I'm joined by a very talented photographer, and her name is Ilya Fisher. There's a very strong connection to the environment and environmental matters throughout her work, whether that's documentary or more abstract in style. And we chat about what motivates her collaborative approach and upcoming shows, and also her relationship to using words within her images as well. There's so much more that you can find out about Ilya and her work, so do keep listening, and we'll share all the links for you to find out more about her at the end of the podcast. It's really fabulous today to be joined by a photographer whose work I am really in love with, and really inspired by. And her name is Ilya Fisher, and I hope I've said that right.
It's Ilya Fisher.
Ilya Fisher. I knew I'd get it the wrong way round. Anyway, Ilya Fisher. So we'll clarify that, and I do apologise. And you're chatting to me today. I've spoken to people from around the globe, from New Zealand through to New Orleans, just so many different places. But you're actually in the same county in the UK, in Cornwall, so we're not too far away from each other. So very welcome to you, Ilya.
Oh, thank you, Josie. It's lovely to be here and chat with you. Thanks.
Not my pleasure, completely. So to kick off our conversation then, what can you actually tell me about your journey into photography and why it's your medium of choice?
I've always loved photography over the years, and they were just snaps, and I would take photographs of memories. Memories have always been like really important, and I have them from always. But it wasn't until about 8 years ago that I started to take more interesting photos, and the people would look at them and want to see them because they kind of abstract things and so on. And then I kind of, I guess I got the bug sort of. And I know just over 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I decided to do, actually, you were part of the influence. I didn't know you, and I met you, and you were doing the MA at Falmouth.
That's right.
And I was kind of thinking about it. and he was so positive. I have just finished the 2 years of that.
Yay!
Because I knew I wanted to step up my work and make it more sophisticated. But what was really, really important for me within the very first term, it took me a long time to get to it, but it was during the first term of that 2 years when I fully realized that we're in a climate emergency. And I hadn't, I always recycled and was sort of conscious about things, but not mindful, but not taking it that seriously. And I really, it came to me then, and I realized that this MA was a really good opportunity for me to find a way that nothing else seemed as important or urgent. I wondered if I could find a way to make my practice all about the climate emergency. My project around that time was taking photos of seaweed and pollution on the surface of the water. So I was doing sort of slightly environmental, but it was really about the aesthetic and about pollution not being a good thing, but that was just a smaller part of it. It wasn't.
Is that the dancing on the surface work?
It certainly is. Yeah. And I had an exhibition of that just before I did the MA. But I guess maybe it was heading towards doing more social work, but I didn't do many. I was just beginning to work in projects and to think a bit more deeply about what my work was. And I just, in the first term, when I realized about the climate emergency, I thought this is a really good opportunity for me to try and find a way to create work about the climate emergency that's original, that has something different to contribute, and also that I would enjoy doing, because it is such an overwhelming subject. It's makes us all very worried. And if I'm going to be able to do it consistently, I need to find a way that I really enjoy working. And that's one of the amazing things that's come out of the last 2 years. I found a way to work on this subject and other social issues that I've done along the way, but in a way that I really, really enjoy, that makes me feel creative.
And I think when people, if we'll let them know how they can look at your work online, etc. later, but I definitely can see that in your work, that sort of passion for the topic that you're photographing or you're sharing, and I think that comes across very strongly in your work. I guess, like you said, I did the MA with Falmouth Flexible. I think I probably started the year before you, or maybe the I can't remember, but yeah, there was and it does give you that wonderful opportunity to actually be able to focus and find your direction. And looking at the dancing on the surface, I can understand what you're saying by sort of, because they're beautiful images. And I think there's another series, and do correct me if I'm wrong about dates, but that might have been an earlier one, which was the Far Away.
They were both around the same time, and I realized they weren't quite the same project. And then there was Trampled, which was these neglected bits of seaweed that looked like sculptures, but I didn't really know how to make them into a sophisticated project with ideas behind them. And that's one of the reasons I went on the course, really. Just that the space where you can just focus on your own work is really helpful.
I totally understand that. So you've finished your MA now, though. Have you graduated now?
Yeah, funnily enough, this morning was the online one, and then next year they're hoping to have a real in-person one.
Oh, I do hope so. It was I do really hope so, because the graduation day was just so much fun. So I should keep my fingers crossed that you'll get to do that next year.
Thank you.
So obviously you have although you say that yourself personally, it wasn't until you had this time to really think about what you wanted to do with your photographic practice, and that you sort of had that light bulb moment where it really sort of struck you, this is what I need to be doing. But the theme of the environment does run through your work and our impact on it. But you also, as well as creating very sort of artistic and thought-provoking images in sort of a more fine art style, shall we say, you also have work that's documentary, and you've covered protests where I think you've been with people who were protesting around sort of climate change, environmental issues, and you've also worked with Black Voices Cornwall, I believe. So what can you tell us about that style of work, actually getting involved in sort of photographing and talking to people who were trying to stand up for something?
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I've got, the two different things. I really enjoy doing sort of fly on the wall, taking these documentary photos for other groups. Yes, so I do that for Black Voices Cornwall, and some of those ended up in the Newlyn Art Gallery, which was amazing. And they did an exhibition, and they had people's signs and people's statements, and two of us photographers. I had 11 photos of some people holding signs, Black Lives Matter signs, and so there's Black Voice Cornwall. Also, No Going Back Sundays,
okay,
which is a wonderful thing that started in St Ives, and every week or every month, it's now going probably to every month, people, the group chooses, or the groups, if they're spread around for a while they were around the world as well, they choose a subject that they feel is really important. Like there was Black Lives Matter one week, or more than 1 week, very concerned about a young man, Osseen Brown, who was in prison and was going to be deported, and it just seemed to be a result of his autism and a kind of institutional racism. So that was a subject returned to quite a few times. Recently, there've been, sometimes it's climate subjects, sometimes it's to do with social housing, just all different subjects. And I go and take their portraits when they hold up the signs so that they can be used in social media.
Yes.
So that's great. And then, of course, Extinction Rebellion, when they need photographers, which is quite often local groups doing that. Sometimes they're really quite creative, exciting events. And I've started to do a bit of video work as well. Like, do you know the penitents? They're incredible. Yes, incredible. Well, I made a video. They had 100 penitents at the G7 in Falmouth one of the days, and I helped them make a video of how to do it, because all those 100 penitents, many of them hadn't, they came from all over the country, didn't know how to do it. So we made a sort of how-to video, and yeah, just other things. But what I've been thinking about recently is this whole climate change thing is just terrible. And how do I cope? And the way that I cope and try not to feel guilty about not doing enough is I do the personal work, and I do these other documentary things that we've just been talking about. Because if I do them, then I feel that I'm doing what I can.
Yes.
And so I feel a bit more able to cope with life. So that's it.
And I think it's sometimes reassuring as well, because we'll come and we'll have a chat about your Unraveling project, which I think sort of covers this topic as well. Is how overwhelming, how when you feel like things are out of your hands, and it's what can you actually do to really change the direction the world feels like it's going in. It can sort of almost make you turn away. I think sometimes in the past people have referred to things such as like charity fatigue, almost, in the sense of if people feel overwhelmed that they can't actually really do anything to help, but actually if you're looking at something and doing something and you are making inroads into what you're trying to achieve for the better. And your Unraveling project, which I think is one of your most recent projects, isn't it? Unraveling.
Yes, it is the most recent one. Yeah.
Yeah. And that is really around global warming, but also the climate, the climate crisis, but coping mechanisms and dealing with the anxiety around that.
Yeah.
And you've because I think again, please correct me if I'm incorrect, but you've used yourself in this project. Is that because you started off with other people and then, or was it always you were sort of?
No, not at all. I started off with my photography taking pictures of beautiful abstract details, to me, that's what attracted me. And then loads of experimentation, and then I was interested, I guess first of all what I became really interested in is words that go with images, because they really add, for me they add depth. When there's some sort of written something with the photographs, then it gives you more to think about. They just mean more. And so I did a lot of experimenting, whether the words were next to it or within the image. And I did a project called I Have Something to Say, where I asked people to give me some words about a subject that they feel really passionate about. And some of them are about climate change and some of them are not. Some of them are about cars, too much cars, flooding. Yeah, that's climate change.
I think there's one there that stood out to me, actually, you mentioning that, is the gentleman, an amazing portrait, but he's protesting against the cancer cells inside.
Yeah, and that's a very, very moving one. Yeah, it always makes me go a bit.
Yes, yeah.
So yeah, I think so that, but that's when COVID hit the world, and I was originally getting people to give me something they feel passionate about, and then taking the photo, and it would be them, we'd create a scene. So it was kind of collaborative, like Perry, who feels about bees, that if there are no bees there's no future, and he has beehives. Really interestingly, since then he's gone more fully vegan and doesn't feel it's right for us to kind of farm bees, and take their honey. So actually he now has the bees, but I don't think he takes the honey from them. But anyway, I got this lovely dramatic picture of him in his white, looks like a hazmat suit, his white bee suit, lying on the ground. I had them all everyone lying on the ground as if they were dead. But I tried. I think it's really, sense of humor. I try and keep that in. And although they could be, upsetting, that's not the intention. The intention is to make them entertaining, because if I can get the person who looks at the images to be intrigued and entertained, then I think, it's got more value. So lovely. And then his beehives in the background. Anyway, I was getting these messages from people, and then we weren't allowed to meet people anymore. It was the first lockdown. So I didn't have a choice, and I don't like to be in front of the camera, but I had to go in front of the camera. I had to be the other people that who had given me messages, and some of them I had to write. It was their words, but I had to physically write the words. Anyway, so, but it was a lot easier than I expected, because I felt it was really amazing. I just felt I had a lot more control. When I was in the picture, I could spend hours on one picture, because I'm not like taking up someone else's time. I could look at the picture, then retake it and put the shutter on, taking like 10 pictures at once. So I could just, see how they are, keep doing it. And then, go back to it another day if I felt that there was a way I could improve on it. So I just felt I had a lot of control. and somehow forgot that the camera is taking pictures of me. You just get involved in the picture, but I guess also knowing I could delete them all.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just felt I had a lot more control in constructing the picture. Yes, so that's how that came about. And yeah, and you can see it's come through in unraveling as well. Yeah.
Yes, and unraveling with you in those images. You've sort of, I guess, with the words, but you've perhaps taken the written element even further, because you're using thread.
Yeah.
So what sort of are they they're printed on fabric rather than paper? Is that how have you
Yeah.
how did you decide on how you would use the thread? I mean, my sewing is terrible, but yours looks so yours is, I can read what you've actually sewn.
Well, I used to be many years ago a textile artist, and I can just use the sewing machine, you know, as if it's my own handwriting. That is how my handwriting looks, and I love doing it. So that's, again, you know, I was saying I have to find ways that I really enjoy doing it. And I really do enjoy using the sewing machine for the writing. And yeah, I did start off in the development, print onto paper and then stitch. But sewing machines are just machines, and they stick, they go wrong, and then the paper gets torn. And I really try to be mindful, and I know you do this way better than I do, be mindful of the environment and pollution and waste and so on. And if I stitch onto fabric, if I stitch it on paper, then and it often got torn and it would be wasted, and I'd have to redo it. And if I unpicked it and, you know, the paper didn't get torn, but I felt something wrong, you know, you've got holes in the paper, and I need that. So if you do it on fabric, you just don't waste it. I can get it printed onto fabric, and then I can stitch on it. Just is much less wasteful. You lose a bit of the crispness and the sharpness of a digital image or a you know, beautifully printed image. But I think, you know, sustainability wise, it's just a lot more sensible.
Yeah, and I think, even though, I mean, I'm actually looking at some now on your website, and I haven't seen them in person, but I think there's almost that, although you say it might lose the crispness because it's on a fabric, it also gives it a slightly almost a gentle element to a topic that actually is really vital and important for us all to be talking about and thinking about. So it's, but almost in a way that is coming back to this anxiety and trying to cope with the anxiety around it, having an image that's got a slightly softer edge. If that makes sense, if I'm making any sense to you at all, that's sort of my take on it. They're incredibly powerful images, and yet at the same time it feels as though they're not, you know, you're not being slapped in the face by them, so you can confront it and take in what's being said.
Yeah, I think that's kind of linked to this really interesting idea that I started to think about women's art, and like the pictures I've done are very much done by a woman. You know, there's the stitching, there's the woman self-portrait.
Okay.
And it, yes, this is sort of this idea of things, you know, they are feminine. You know, the way some of the images are constructed are very feminine. The way the figure is. I don't think of it as me. I think of the figure as a metaphor, you know, within the image. So I try not to think of it too much as being myself. I think I'd really like to say one thing is that when I researched this project before I started it, I had in my mind, because, you know, previous work had been a bit more documentary or about what people gave me, you know, their words. And I didn't want to have this project to be documentary. We know there's a climate crisis. You know, most people are aware of it. The question is, why are we not doing more? And we have so many amazing documentary photographers out there. You know, I'm not needed to take photographs that show it exists.
Yes.
So I was really trying to find a way that I could contribute something a bit different, and it also in a way that I would enjoy doing it. So I just did tons of reading, loads and loads of reading, all different climate change books and things, which I love doing. I love reading. I guess that's another thing that's really important if you can be doing what you enjoy doing.
Yeah.
I've read some amazing books, and if there's time, I could recommend a couple. But there's this
definitely.
I was reading a Naomi Klein book, and she mentioned a British psychotherapist called Sally Weintraub, and I thought, oh, and she's British, so I'd be interested. And years ago, I did a 2-year course at the Tavistock child psychotherapy. So I'm interested. I was interested when you said like a climate change psychotherapist. So anyway, there is this quote that really, I would say, inspired the project, and she says in it, anxiety is the biggest psychic barrier to facing the reality of anthropogenic global warming. Because I was just fascinated by the subject. Why is it that we know but we're not doing more? And there Sally Weintraub is saying it's because we're frightened, because of the anxiety it stirs up inside us. And I thought that's a really valuable thing for me to be thinking about and exploring. So that is really the basis of it. I explore a bit different thoughts then, and the words on the images are things to think about, and also exploring excuses that we give and that I give, that I think about, like later, or I've got other things to worry about.
Yeah. And I think most people will be feeling exactly the same way, and there is this, I personally believe you do have to give yourself a break because you can I think just end up feeling despondent and potentially losing that sort of desire, or not desire necessarily, but your energy, I guess, for sort of keeping going. And I think as well, around you saying sort of anxiety, I mean, often fear is what stops people doing many things. Fear of failure, fear of what other people might think of them, so being fearful of climate change, almost in a sense, I can see that then stops people confronting it and looking at it.
And she says and Sally Weintraub says that once people look at, face the anxiety, and once they're able to move on and accept it and move past it, then we're more able to address the issues and take action and start creating a better world. So it's so important, this anxiety.
So have you found then personally, through your own projects, not just for other people looking at your work and that you're wanting to connect with through your work, have you found personally then that your sort of coping mechanisms are better or more consistent? Have you found that you've influenced yourself?
People, this is something that people ask, and for me, certainly working on this project and thinking about it, I find that really helpful. I find it really helpful that I found a way that I enjoy doing it. And one of the first things that got me so scared about the situation is my children. How will they manage without me? But if I can feel that I've done all I can, that's the best I can do. So and also, I just feel it's really important to appreciate the time we have now. If there isn't going to be a future, say we get to 30 years and things are really bad, and all we've done is worry, then what a waste of time. We look back and we think, I didn't appreciate every moment that we had, to enjoy this beautiful world. So I try and keep all that in mind and enjoy the work, but do the documentary things for the other groups, and
Well, one of your other pieces of work is actually is now actually in the British Library. That's very impressive.
I
And that's
believe
your
it.
that's your, it's called your a book called Excuses and a zine, Why Would We Want to Face This? So can you just tell me a little bit more about those two then?
Yeah.
And how you've got into the British Library? I'm very intrigued.
It's amazing. Can't believe it myself. It's all part of unraveling. I love making things. And part of unraveling in the series of images, there are a couple of the excuses images, but I just wanted to make a book.
Yeah.
So I made the excuses book is like the width of the fabric roll from the place that prints for me. I'm trying to be mindful. It's not a big book. It's the width, and I've got 5 images, and then in the gaps between the images, it's the same size, and there I stitched the excuses on. So like 2 of them, the excuses are in the series Unraveling, but this has got 5 excuses. I've asked loads of people to give me their excuses. I thought about what mine are, and so it's basically a zigzag book, because I stitch on them in between the images, and then iron them where the page folds, and then made a hardback cover for them where I've stitched the title, my name on them, and used secondhand, like old tablecloth, beautiful old tablecloth materials. So I'm trying to be mindful, and like the zine, is some photos that I didn't put into the final set of images. I put them into the zine, and with some words that I stitched and photographs, which I think the zine is like the message at the heart of the project. Why would we want to face this? The anxiety that's kind of made up of fear, and sort of fear of the future, guilt because unknowingly we've contributed, grief and loss, all that. Anyway, so yes, I've made it, but I do feel bad making things and putting more stuff in the world. And so I found this printer which is carbon neutral. The zines are tiny, they're just A7, which actually in the end does not detract. They're quite cute, they're really small. And instead of using staples, because I was a textile artist, and before, when I didn't care, I have quite a bit of spools of thread which probably won't ever get used. So I'm using those. I'm stitching them together, and non-toxic inks. So and I was in a group, a photo group thing with other people I don't know, where we meet once a month and present different work. And one of the people there works at the British Library, and she's not in the contemporary artist book space, but she said, I think my colleague would be really interested. I had given a talk on unraveling, and I made a 10-minute video where I explained it all and showed some of the work, including the excuses book and the zine. And amazingly, he watched the whole 10 minutes. I'm just amazed at that, because it's quite a long time. And she had just recommended that he get that he might be interested in the excuses book, and he wrote back saying that the British Library would like to acquire, which doesn't mean purchase actually, which was very, very exciting. Both of them, the excuses book and the zine. And the book, I mean, no two are quite the same. The photos are printed exactly the same, but because I hand stitched the messages on each one, they're not exactly identical. So they're kind of printed as a series, but then each one is like a unique series. They're a series, but not exactly the same.
Slight individualism to each to them.
Yeah.
Oh, that is brilliant. Congratulations. That's
Thank you.
A really lovely outcome from that. So I'm really pleased for you.
Thank you.
Now, I do ask everybody who takes part in the podcast this next question, and it's really just around how you think photography can be used to support our natural world raise awareness about environmental issues. I think when people look at your work, if they go and visit your website, etc., they can, I think it would be blatantly obvious in you because of the topics you're covering, which is fantastic. But how do you think then photography as a whole can influence perhaps how we treat the world ourselves?
It is such a visual world, and people just love looking at pictures. So I guess, you know, from the documentary side of it, it's just a way of getting information out there. And then with the more creative side where I am, where it's making people think. So, and the fact that it's so visual and it's photography just is a way in, I guess, to get people thinking about these things.
So it's almost sort of a way to start those conversations, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and absolutely, as you say, we do live in a very visual world, whether that's photographs, TV, films, etc. So yeah, it's a very powerful medium, I think, to use to continue to help chip away and raise it, you know, raising awareness on topics. But what's actually next for you then, Ilya? I believe you have a show, an exhibition coming up.
Oh, so nice of you to mention it. Yes, that's what I'm working on at the moment. If anyone is in St Ives, August the 15th to the 20th, I've got a really beautiful place in the centre of St Ives. It's the Crypt Gallery in Norway Square. That it's mentioned on my website, and I've got together with 4 other artists. They're not photographers, they're artists, and well, one, Bill, is actually makes the most incredible spoons from wood. Yeah, absolutely beautiful. 2 of them are artists that use textiles. Oh, it's just really exciting. We're all concerned about the environment and beautiful, fun work. Yeah. So.
And is that called In This Together?
It is. Yes. Yeah. That's it.
And so the whole sort of ethos then of this exhibition is to look at environmental matters, or are you having sort of, will you be there on site at all if
Absolutely, yes, I'm going to be there most of the time, but there'll always be one of us there at least. But it's only a week, so yeah, I'm hoping to be there most of the time, and would love to talk to anyone who comes along, definitely.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I'm definitely going to do my best to actually come down there and meet you. I really shouldn't have any excuse because I'm only 40 minutes or so away.
Fabulous.
So I will do my absolute best to get there.
Well, most of the work is art on the wall, but we wanted a more 3D element to the exhibition. So the spoons and the sculptures will bring it, you know, more into the room as well.
Well, I do hope that lots of people come along and have a look at that. If they can't actually make it down to St Ives to see your work and obviously the others, but or to chat with you about your work, where can people actually find you? What are your website details or any social media?
Yeah, it's ilyafisher.com. So just my name, ILYA Fisher.com. But I'll also give you the link to the 10-minute video where I talk about and explain unraveling.
And is that on YouTube?
It is, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Fantastic. And are you on social media?
Yeah, Instagram, it's backwards, it's at Fisher Ilya. So my surname and then my first name. Yeah, at Fisher Ilya. Thank you.
No problem at all. I'll make sure all of this is put into the podcast text as well, so people will be able to follow those links and find out more. I just want to say an absolutely huge thank you for taking part. I know that there's probably so much more that we could chat about, and I know that there are some of the projects that we that you've done that we haven't had a big chat about, and I will just say quickly though, one of them is called Real Estate Opportunities, which I'm quite fascinated about. because you've done it in the style of a photographer that I think, you know, sort of most people who work in sort of photographic art or study photography will have heard of. But I'm not going to say his name because I always get his surname wrong.
It's Ed Rusche.
That's that. Thank you. But that as well is another really great lockdown project, I think, that you did.
Yeah, it was a bit of fun, really.
Yeah, but really, really striking, and definitely see where you're coming from with sort of the influence there from Ed. But thank you, yeah, thank you so much once again, and yeah, everyone, please head over. You have to have a look at Ilya's work, you really do. So thank you, and we'll hopefully see each other in person very soon.
Oh, thank you, definitely.
I so enjoyed chatting with Ilya, and I know we could chat so much more. But I think one of the things that we can all take away from the conversation that we had is that it's really important to be kind to each other, to yourself, and the world around us. I hope that you'd like to find out more about Ilya and her work, and if you want to, as mentioned, head over to her website at ilyafisher.com or find it on Instagram at Fisher Ilya. I will put that in the podcast text too. And if you'd like to chat to me about your photographic work and how it touches on environmental issues, then do please get in touch with me at josiepurcellphotography.com. See you next time.
Yay!
Hello everybody, welcome to the Photopocene podcast with me, your host, Josie Purcell. This is where I share eco-conscious photography with you in an audio way. I'm joined this time by curator, researcher and photographer Maica Gugolati, whose work, Floating Tropics, uses collage to create fantastical and surreal representations of the lesser known, to those who don't live there, industrial scape of Trinidad and Tobago. But we start with an introduction from Maica herself via a soundscape, expanding and reflecting her work from these islands. And we go on to have a fascinating discussion about how we shape what we see and what we don't, and what she describes as puzzles of fictionalities, and so much more. I hope you are as intrigued by her process and the topic as I am. Enjoy listening.
Landscape. Landscape. Scape etymologically means to shape. Landscape, to shape the lands. What we see has already been shaped by the eye. I, first person pronoun. I, organ of the visual system. The eye shapes the lands with the power of imagination. The gaze has trace of reliability, is challenged, as the landscapes you see show new fictionalities that denounce the already made imagination that shaped all lands we think to be real. Landscape composition was originally represented by the artistic movement of pictorialism, which emphasizes the beauty of representation rather than the documentation of reality of a place. In the Caribbean, lands were historically represented through and under the imaginative dreamscapes of painters' gazes. These last ones tended to the expectations of their commissioners, who wanted depicted the newness of the unknown to possess and appropriate while affirming and reaffirming power. The eye-eye relation created landscapes as scenic economies. In the 18th century, the uncultivated lands of the Caribbean were considered terra nullius, and enslavement was used as a proof of the process of civilization. 100 years later, after slave trade was forbidden and within the parameters of Romanticism, the land started to be represented as a sublime expression of wilderness. From a complete absence of human beings in landscape paintings through Europe and the Americas, where virgin cultivated lands were depicted as paradisiacal, human presence started to be depicted in these paintings as a part of nature of the same visual pictorial regime. What you always saw as the representation of the landscapes is therefore a mimicry of reality. It functions to deceive us into believing an imaginary world that has to exist because of our realistic projections. This bucolic fantasy shaped the world, letting you think that a new one had been discovered. The ideal image of life in those landscapes matched its pastoral poetry. Is this scopophilia neutral? Never. What we see is the I-I tension between power codification. In plantation societies, the lands were fields of contention for power relation that included racial, ethnic, gender, and religious classification and separatism. Picturing a landscape is like manicuring a space that unveils its panoramic self in all its spectacularism. Panorama, pan, oran, from the ancient Greek, all spectacle. What you are seeing now are the oniric, spectacular, trans-industrial landscapes of Trinidad and Tobago. Each singular frame exists, has an independent photo, and follow the ontological fictionality of the landscape per se. What if these romantic roots of pictorial eutropic landscape meet a petrotropia industrial scape that communicates with its complex cultural landscape? In Trinidad, commercial oil production began in 1909. Being one of the largest oil production countries in South America, its lands were divided via plantation and extractions maneuver. In my imaginary way of shaping existent, already multi-shaped lands, I show you hyperreal digital photo collage. Photography is the most equivocal reference of reality, emended fully into a framed system of fictionality. Beguiled by what is and what is not real, you are inclined to ask yourself, how true are the representations of the land I always saw? Global society is based on the people's dream, and historical projections of imagination also transform the tropical landscape into an alive dreamscape. Extractions of lands, extractions of resources, extraction of free labor. Photography is accumulated in archives as a source of truth that should never change or be questioned. How are these landscapes you see negotiating the lust for reliability of the representation of what is showed and what has been framed of or added to? If the landscape is commanded by visuality and imposes a process of identification to its own inhabitants, what we see shapes our way of living and creates social and subjective identities. Places are therefore mnemonic devices that imply a process of viewing where the living beings are both spectator and actors. These landscapes we see are practice spaces, shared ones, as well as relational ones. How have the national and historical panoramas been shaped as a spectacle that shows what we now see? How are these representations reappropriated as national etiquette of self-exoticism, or adopted for nationalistic purpose and touristic and consumeristic ones? Here we are, coming from an anthropocentric historical assumption that the I shapes the landscapes we live in. But what if the land assuming its agency, becoming a participant personage that shares its plural realities? So now, I ask you to close your eyes, dislocate the I relations to the landscapes you know. I invite you to feel, to listen the lived inhabited stories the lands are telling you, the spiritual dialogue, the situated knowledge of your eldest and of your own. Visualize them. Now open the eyes. How do you see your lands?
It's an absolute pleasure this time on the Photopocene podcast to be joined by a photographer whose work is a very exciting work and looking at Trinidad and Tobago's landscapes. But she's going to tell us more about this project that she's been working on herself, and her name is Maica Gugolati. So welcome very much, Maica. It's really lovely to have you here.
Hello, thanks a lot. Nice to meet you.
Yes, and you. Lovely to chat with you. So I understand that today you're chatting to me from Portugal, but you aren't necessarily based there all the time. And the work that we're going to talk about, as I've just mentioned, is focusing on Trinidad and Tobago. So how have you come to be involved and create this piece of photographic work? What's your story and how did you get into photography?
Yes, actually, it's true that it's pretty far from Europe, but I started to know this country, Trinidad and Tobago, from my early experience of PhD studies, where I started more than 10 years ago, and I finished already a bunch of years ago. So it's from that my journey in the Caribbean started, and from where some of the shoots that you see in this project are from.
Really, really strong images as well. But what can you tell listeners about the work? What can you actually, how would you explain it to someone who, obviously we're talking on a podcast, so we're not necessarily sharing the images visually. How could you explain the work to listeners then? What is it about? And it's called Floating Tropics, that's correct, isn't it?
Yes, it is. So actually it is a series of photographs that at the very beginning were thought and were planned to be in dialogue with audio files of stories and a collage of stories in Trinidad, on one of the two islands, so the island of Trinidad in the West Indies. And everything started, well, maybe I can start with the process and why this is a project of photo collage and one of my digital photo collages. So I'm photo collaging them through Photoshop.
Okay.
And one of the idea for me at the very beginning was to play with really real images that I took personally during all my years of field work that I started from 2013. So I started that year to go back and forth to Trinidad every year. Well, except now with this pandemic.
Yeah.
Yes. So actually, I found myself literally playing with a lot of extra material that I have from my doctorate, which does not belong at all to the topic of landscaping. And I was just trying to refeel while being here in Europe which were the main actually details that were connecting me with this kind of very complex reality that the country is, at least for me. And one of the points that, first of all, was the presence, the presence of the sky, which it can be very funny to say, but in a very big megalopole, it could be like London, it could be Paris. I mean, usually human being, at least on my sense, the human being has a kind of feeling of extreme power. Basically, the city is made in order to fit the human being, and there is nothing else. On the contrary, when you are on different areas, especially in the rural areas where I was, for example, for my free work in Trinidad, the sky takes all its space. So basically, human being, I always feel it's very tiny. It's like when you're in front of the ocean. I mean,
yes,
basically the presence of human being disappears. So and remembering that experience, which is pretty well, is clearly given by the landscape. I was even thinking of another present that for me was very, very prominent, but apparently for the population that I was working with, who became friends, of course, was definitely invisible, was all the industrial scape that the island of Trinidad has. And has maybe somebody does not know that Trinidad and Tobago is a country in the Caribbean that has oil and gas extraction, and as one of the few. And what for me was extremely visually present was this presence of oil pumps and gas extraction areas, all in the middle of the island, just really close to the roads where I was driving every time. And this kind of silence in this area, completely empty space, empty areas where nature basically was, by the extraction itself, completely erased. And then there was these oil pumps in the middle. And this was for me extremely striking. And apparently for the most of people who I was able to exchange with in all these years, it was just belonging to the regular view, the regular gazing of the space.
Yes.
And that's why personally I started to question what does it mean a landscape. And of course I recognize that as it is usually in the Caribbean, because of colonial past and touristic interest nowadays, basically all this industrial scape, it disappears. Disappears in representations, usually in postcard representations, and what we think of the Caribbeans are. And basically, while chatting for many years, not just about this, but this was inside of the plan, I recognized that even these industrial scapes disappear from the memories of the most of the people living there.
So they're not sort of almost aware of it anymore themselves, in a sense. Is that what you mean?
Well, it's just this hyper visibility of this industrial scape inside of the landscape became, basically due to its hyper visibility, became invisible.
Yes.
And then I chose to take photos of industrial scapes and landscapes, which could be like much more pictorial, as supposedly were always depicted in the history. And I tried digitally to combine them in a kind of hyper real image that look like real, but it's definitely not. So it's a kind of surreal world.
I think there's one image that I've seen that is part of the series that I definitely, when I've looked at it, what you've just said is Trinis in Wonderland. That's a very lush, bright, vivid vegetation, but yeah, juxtaposed with sort of, I think, elements from the oil industry on that one, or satellite dishes. So it's
yes,
yeah,
it's a mixture of 4 or 5 photographs.
Yeah, and it is really quite powerful with what you've just said. That sort of the juxtaposition between these things, and sort of, but how they sort of almost look natural at the same time. They're sitting together, so they're very unnatural together, but at the same time, the way you've combined it, it's almost like that is what is there.
Yes, exactly. This frame, for example, and the title was taken from a friend in Trinidad who helped me a lot during my PhD. And he was mentioning actually the Society of Trinidad has and Trinidadians as Trinis in Wonderland. So, of course, thinking of the book of Lewis Carroll, Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah.
And this idea was because of this a very, very fast way of gaining money. I mean, historically speaking, with this floating, of course, as well income sources of that is from the oil and gas incomes, and the market, of course, of this extraction income was providing a kind of sensation of being in a wonderland where everything was possible. And this wonderland, of course, was expanded as well into the vision of what should have been a beautiful land. And that is where even during a lot of chats that are behind all these images and the constructions of the images were like vision of surreal words while seeing them basically present with me, that's for sure they were not matching. So the vision of these people were describing their own lands was not matching the reality of the vision of the land itself. So this Trinis in Wonderland that you are mentioning is one of the images that actually talk about this juxtaposition of visions, of dreams, of realities all together.
And I think your work as well, it touches on imposed gaze as well. What does that mean then in the context of this work?
Yes, I was thinking of the imposed gaze that has been basically decided from the historical concept of what does it mean to see or an already made landscape, for example, in historical paintings. And this was because while showing my work, some of the photos that we are discussing today, one of the friends who is an artist in Trinidad directly reconnected one of my photos to an historical painting. And this historical painting was made by Casabon, and who was actually one of the colonial painters who was depicting the island of Trinidad at the time.
Okay.
And it's there. So, for example, the work, the frame that I'm talking about is Bamboo Arch Casabon now. And it's there that I recognized that even my way of course, taking pictures, so which of course is never neutral, was definitely shaped by the vision of Trinidad historically that I had during my studies. So after that, I started to try to question myself and question how this vision that's been already shaped historically, that was shaped from this history, basically from the gaze of these painters, who I started to make some researches, and historically speaking, these painters were never really depicting what they were seeing. They were depicting what the commissioner wanted to see.
Yeah.
So basically I said, okay, this is a puzzle of fictionalities that has been seen and conceived as real, and of course replicated in history till what I see nowadays. So basically the link of this condition is that what we see has been already shaped. So what we see is shaping as well the reality itself. So there is no real division between shaping and living our own landscape.
So when you've shown these, I believe you've shown this series in Trinidad and Tobago, what has been the sort of feedback and the connections that you've made locally then on the work? How do people respond to these images?
So yes, I was able to show them in several occasions, and the last one was in one of the festivals explicitly for environmental festival named The New Fire. And I mean, the answer was very interesting, I would say. First of all, it was a beginning of and the wish of a new conversation about landscape, because the project for me is a beginning in order to understand which are the knowledge of, the little stories and the narrations behind those places that I took photos about. And in order to start a new fictional stories that are real at the same time. But this was a beginning point that the most of people that showed my work were very happy to start. At the same time, looking at the photos is very interesting. Some of the people with the very hyper-realistic shots were even questioning themselves in their memories in order to find really the real place where these photos were taken.
Okay.
Which, of course, it did not exist.
Yeah.
And for example, the one of floating power, so where there is this, there is actually the industry of oil refinery that is on one of the islands that exists on the northeast of the country. This does not exist, but for some of the, actually some of the people that I questioned with this work, they were actually asking themselves if they lost this little detail in their own gazing. So that was very interesting, because this trick effect that I wanted to give, thanks to this digital hyperrealistic collage, was at least with some of them was okay. So worked well, was on point. In any case, in other points, just to finish, other two maybe main directions that I was able to have feedbacks and comments were first. That most of the people did not recognize that they are surrounded by industrial scapes. And after these kind of comments shared by the most of the people who I was able to share in this event, last event especially, there was, which I did not agree, a kind of, again, a reaction towards the industrial scape, saying that they have to reorganize a kind of new, better life, closer to nature, in order to. And at that moment, I was a little bit skeptical about this dichotomical way of living life, where basically you reject industrial scape in order to hide yourself in a paradisiacal, inexistent nature, instead of thinking that the future, at least what I think is the goal of my work, is how to find a solution and a future, sustainable future to live together with energy and different kinds of energies.
Yeah, the extractive industry is obviously always has a huge impact on the environment where it is. So it sounds almost as, people, if they protest it or have ever protested it or are still protesting about potential extractive industries wherever they are, but how you might then adapt and almost get used to it when those industries are in action where you are. So are people obviously with this series in Trinidad and Tobago, has it sort of influenced people if they want to address any of the companies that are working there? Has it raise those sorts of conversations?
Well, in general, there is little conversation and very little. And I think at least for all my studies behind, well, especially because it's very funny to say, but at least on my own experience, you can live basically on the island for several years knowing that existence of extractive income and of course companies and industry without really being affected by it. So there is this kind of parallel world. That the most of people are into, at least the people that live inside of, for example, in the urban areas of the main two cities. So I during this manifestation where I show my work, the last one, there were two teachers that offered, for example, to show this series of work to their students in order to see, has in that young age, what they were thinking about future and landscape and future and environment in a sense. And in any case, for what I was able to read and study, much more than what I could get as information from the people themselves, it was that it's very, very ambiguous, the relation, I think, for the most of the time, for small countries, of small island countries as is Trinidad, with this enormous engine of power, let's say economic power and status, where of course you are basically the creator of issues and the victim of the issue itself, since in many cases an insular state, and climate change is of course one of the main problems nowadays. So there is this very problematic dynamic and dichotomy of knowledge and in times of worries, and a lot of silence.
Yes. Yeah. Is that silence because people might be fearful to say anything? I mean, obviously these industries can, in societies around the world, bring economic benefits and jobs, etc. So do you think there is always that slight balancing act between?
I have the feeling personally that there is a balancing act between even comforts, I would say, and sensation of globalizations that, of course, all this richness can provide, and differentiations from themselves and other countries, which are, for example, still third world countries, and at the same time, knowledge and, of course, awareness that this kind of future cannot be sustainable by itself.
Yeah.
So I have the feeling that it's much more this rather than a kind of, life of silence it, maybe violent silencing life into the oil world. But it's even true that it's very difficult to have informations and access to these companies and discussions. So I cannot really say for that.
Yeah, and there is always, obviously, I think when we're talking about environmental, a huge onus on those companies and businesses that are actually doing that work to make genuine strides towards more sustainable ways of working.
Yes. Absolutely. And one of the works that, for example, I've made after this series that you saw, that I'm continuing the work, is another collage with one of the images of with an image of a ship that is actually carrying oil from Venezuela, who has been basically illegally stuck on the Gulf of Trinidad, between Trinidad and Venezuela. And this is one of the major issues and worries, environmental worries for the country, not just for Trinidad, but for all the Caribbean archipelago. Because if something happened to this cargo, basically the archipelago will be completely full of oil spill. So, but still, and this is a geopolitical issue, enormously problematic, that is still there in debate.
I mean, with the Floating Tropics series, though, what I have noticed is that you've worked very collaboratively in a sense. Although the photographs are yours and you've created the imagery, it's been part of a bigger project called Extracting Us. And that is where other people have been involved, other contributors from various places, various backgrounds. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yes, absolutely. There was I was starting. I started already before this group that belonged to Extracting Us to make my own photos, but I was basically alone creating with all the stories that I already told you. And then there was an initiative made of several researchers, because I am myself a researcher at the university. And who are not just the researchers, luckily enough. So there are like artists and researchers themselves that they tried to mix their skills and their interest into this topic of extractivism. So this has been a group made of, we didn't know each other before this event, and which was very important, I would say, where actually we were able to know some of the few researchers that are happy to be other things except just the researchers, I would say, and they used their creativity and their artistic skills and knowledge to make their own projects all over the world about always extractivism. So I myself cover Trinidad and Tobago, but all the other authors of the same website, they cover different areas of the world, and is with definite techniques, and not just photography, videos, drawings, some of them even participative techniques of sculpture, and some more artistic than others. So it really depends on the person.
It is a really fascinating group project, and I haven't had enough time to spend looking at all of it. But yeah, definitely worth a look at the Extracting Us project indeed. And it's just really lovely to see, like you say, when people come together and the different skills that they can bring and the different stories that they can share as well, really does add up to something that can be quite powerful. And Extracting Us, I believe, is you've had some online events last year. Is that going to be an ongoing project then, do you think, for the foreseeable?
Extracting us itself, I think, is not, but we are still in contact for and open for new other projects, collaborative projects, especially with some of them. So, and my project itself, Floating Tropics, keep expanding and keep continuing. So, the idea is to, of course, open up and collaborate as much as possible with other possibilities, as my conversation with you now and your work. And of course, this might be a possibility. It's not official and formal. I think it's a question of funding. This event was based on specific academic fundings.
Yes.
And that has been finished. We were, and as usually it happens, at least in the work that I know, I mean, everything is basically self-funded afterwards. So
yes,
it depends of condition, time, and possibilities. That's why networking is extremely important.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you have with Floating Tropics, you have been able to exhibit it, and I believe you've exhibited in Trinidad and Tobago, but also in the UK. What can you tell me about where it's been on show and what might be happening next with where people might be able to see the work?
Well, so this work of Floating Tropics and all the other artists and researchers of Extracting Us has been shown online, unfortunately, because it was in the middle of the pandemic last year, and but it was supported by the Onca Art Gallery, which is in Brighton, UK. Mm-hmm. And this art gallery has been very important because I had kind of organized this platform support. And event support, even though it was online for the time, and now it's on site, so it's always available on site. The works, unfortunately, are just available online for now, and because it was, of course, a temporary event, as the most of exhibitions are. So if COVID would have not been there, it would have been a physical experience, so a physical exhibition. Linked with founded experience founded by the Brighton University. All this about environment.
Okay.
Nowadays, it's still there. My website in construction, and so hopefully I will show little by little in my Instagram. In any case, I show even the other new works that are linked to Floating Tropics and are visible here on the website that you have.
Fantastic.
And so little by little, it will be there.
I will make sure those links are shared in the podcast information, so people can definitely come and have a look at the images, because they are incredibly bold and I think very thought-provoking as well. And even if you don't have a personal connection with Trinidad and Tobago, I still think you will absolutely have feeling response to the images and the way that you've created them and the story you're actually telling with them. Now, and saying that, one of the things that I like to ask everyone who's on the podcast is, how do you think your photographic work and or photography in general can be used as a tool to raise awareness of environmental issues or of environment-related issues that are taking place?
But my hope and the main goal of using photography for me is to, first of all, I would say, is to create questions to the most of viewers about what you are really seeing. I mean, in terms of reliability of the information that you're getting, because of course, not all what we see is real. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, one of the other goals, I have three goals. So the second one is a kind of reflexive step towards a kind of inner vision of what you would love to see and live. So see and live for me is the same thing. Has the environment. That's why landscaping was important for me. The environment itself that you want to live for your life in the present and in the future. Mm. And hopefully with this photographic work, how to match the first and the second step. So how then, since I know that I can create through visuality and living visuality in a sense, how do I want to see my future and how can I do something for it? Therefore, this is the real environmental aspect of engagement. So how can I make action in order to see in the future what I would love to see and live?
And for you then, what actually is next? Do you have any new projects that you're looking to work on that are either related to similar aspects that you've worked on already, or are you looking at maybe doing something completely different?
Oh no, I mean I'm working as a freelance art curator as well. So I actually use this space and hopefully working even with my photos, why not together with other artists who actually are working on environmental issues. So I'm, for example, in contact with one artist who is Shaka Fumo, who is he living in Kinshasa and in Democratic Republic of Congo, and he works with performative costumes made with children of the city in order to really sensibilize the question of recycling and the question of pollution on the city.
Okay.
And then I'm working with another artist from Pakistan who is trying actually to question the old colonial portraits of the hairlands and see how differently are lived now from a female gender perspective. So I hope to try to build up a kind of new project with other artists in order to collaborate differently, and hopefully with my photos included, in order to re-question environment, but on a different way that is not just boldly explaining or showing the issue, but it's like trying to give questions to the viewers in order to find their own answers and what they want for their own future, hopefully individually and collectively.
Well, that sounds incredibly exciting, and I really hope that you do let us know or share that on your social media, etc., as those things evolve, because that does sound really fascinating, and I'd love to be able to learn more and share that on in future. Now, one of the other things I just wanted to ask you about is, I think you've sort of described the sort of the viewpoint of your work as feminist political ecology. What do you mean by that?
Well, this is the feminist political ecologies is a very, very wide discussion that is being, for example, used in the academia. Basically, what I try is really to use some of the readings that I'm having in order to integrate it with this definitely this idea of creating a critic sense of perception of the environment itself. So, which is definitely in connection with the words and not so actually the idea of linking synesthetically and in a haptic way. What does it mean visuality? The problem of images and photography is that we only think is divided from the self, which is definitely not. So that's why my photos means what you see is what can be real.
Okay.
So the idea of this family perspective is to say that first of all, introspection and of course a linkage between the domains and between realities are real, are doable, and absolutely needed to be done, where basically there is no division anymore between object and subject. So what I see is what I am. So what I can create is what I will be.
So I think with your work as well, you were looking at sort of trying to find these new eco ways of living, and that was together between non-humans and humans. What are you trying to achieve through that then? How can you create that?
Well, I hope we can create a beginning of conversation. I say we because I mean a conversation is never alone, so I have to be with somebody to create it. And because what struck me most is that what is always really this idea of keep seeing a regularity of vision, and if, for example, even a regularity of, for example, sometimes even disturbing images of the reality can sometimes kind of anesthetize the perception of the issue. And this is what I did not want to have. So the idea, for example, of this collage is even to have a kind of trick effect where the person I don't want to think that the viewer is anesthetized by what he sees.
Okay.
Actually, it's the opposite. So I really hope the point is to not feel, let's say, bored by the regularity of the issues, but actually to try to ponderate attention and of the environmental issues in the world in general, and all its complications and geopolitical interests behind, at least to make our own little part. Anyhow, it is.
Yeah. And with the work that you've done in Trinidad and Tobago, are there any other sort of groups that you worked with in particular to create your work?
Well, maybe I would love to have maybe just a clear and open thank to basically two of the artists who helped me the most with the discussion, who are in Trinidad, and one is Christopher Cozier, and the other one is Tamara Tamchak-Cruikshank, and they are two amazing friends who literally were the first to see my work, since I was very afraid to show something, since supposedly formally I'm a researcher, and this artistic background should be for the university always, put on the corner. So they were the ones that pushed me at the very beginning to continue this research. So I really wanted to thank them formally.
Well, I'm really glad that they did push you, because you have created a really fascinating body of work, and I hope to definitely see more in future and hear more in future, Maica. I think it's a very important conversations, and as you say, you can't really have a conversation on your own, so it's a really good way to start them. Obviously, we've mentioned that people can see your work online, and I believe the website that they could go to is extractingus.org.
Yes.
But if people want to sort of follow you on Instagram or social media, where can they find you?
Yes, of course. So they can find me on Instagram with my name and surname, so Maica Gugolati, and in Facebook as well. I have a specific page that is about the coloniality and visuality, which is open and public, which is Maica Gugolati, Decoloniality and Vision, and my personal Facebook account, which is Maica Gugolati still. So in case, just send a request.
Fantastic. And if and when we may be able to actually go to shows in person, or if you're able to now, is there anywhere upcoming that you'll be on show in the near future?
Not yet. I'm a little bit. I wanted to expand a little bit more with much more even soundscape in order to integrate it and propose somewhere else. So I even prefer, for sure, for now, to have some collective experiences on site. It will be amazing. So in case, Josie, if you have any opportunities and you feel to share, we'll be happy, but not yet, in any case, on the plan. Not on site, at least.
That's okay. As soon as you do, then please let me know, and I'll absolutely, definitely make sure that we share things on for everyone. Well, I've had a really lovely time chatting to you, and I always feel like it's always too short, and there's probably 100 more questions I could ask you. But I just wanted to say a big thank you for taking the time out to chat to me, and I hope you've enjoyed it too, Maica.
Yes, it was a pleasure, and thanks a lot for the questions. It gave me new ideas, so it's a beginning for further exchanges, I hope.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you, Maica. Thank you.
Thank you.
I always feel so honoured to hear about the work of other photographers and photo artists whose practice or projects play a role in highlighting environment-related issues, and Maica's is no exception. It's wonderful to learn new things, share ideas, and open ourselves up to fresh points of view, culture, and of course, photography. I'd love to hear from you if your photography relates to environmental topics in some way. So do get in touch with me via josiepurcellphotography.com.